Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything is Energy. Happy Sunday. I'm here with the weekly astrology report for the week of May 3rd through the 9th, 2026. This is a week of, refinement, refining our path, and also grounding the mind. And it's worth noting that we had a major shift last week with Uranus moving into Gemini. That is going to be something that it's a generational shift, and we're just dipping our toe into what that really means. I will remind us that Uranus um, spent the last little bit of time in Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign. And as much as Uranus, the lightning bolt of change, happens quickly in a fixed earth sign, there's some there's some inherent tension there. Uranus is a little bit more or a lot more comfortable in Gemini because Gemini is mutable air. Just like it sounds, mutable means movable and air is movable. So it's interesting for us to think about things in our mental body and our mental world picking up speed. That being said, that's kind of more along the horizon for I'll do a May forecast for you guys tomorrow about this month that we've just started. But we're still in Taurus season. The sun is in Taurus. And some of the aspects this week kind of signal that it's still a good idea for us to pump the brakes a little bit here and to process what we are thinking. If we're having a mental activation this week, this month, for the summer into this year, it's grounding our insight, staying in our body as we're having downloads and being able to integrate the things that we understand into our physical world. Therein lies the beauty of what we're living through. So there's kind of a tension between speed and stability and between mental activation and really being uh, an embodied presence. So this week in particular, it's not a week to rush. It's a week, as I mentioned, to refine. So let's get started with today, Sunday, May 3rd. This is a day of new mental terrain. We have Mercury semi-sextile, excuse me, to Uranus. That already happened. That was around 4 a.m. this morning. And this is a really subtle energy, but it's a meaningful kind of opening to this week. And Mercury is in Taurus and it's connecting with Uranus, which, as I mentioned, is newly in the sign of Gemini. So this is kind of a new relationship that's beginning right here. If I mentioned, Uranus and Gemini is about our mental body, Mercury is the planet of communication, and it's the new relationship that we're thinking of is between thought and perception as well as innovation. And one of the things that keeps coming to mind for me is how profoundly important our consciousness is. And if we think about the way we spend our consciousness, as if we had little tokens for everything, every second that we got to put in a machine, how are we spending those seconds? What are we looking at? What are we speaking about? Because what's being activated with the Uranus transition and what's part of this May energy that I'll expound on tomorrow, it matters. We're the change makers. We're the creators. We're the change that we seek. So part of the download that's really coming through this week, and it's starting with this Mercury semi-sextile to Uranus, is that, yeah, there are new ideas emerging, like me with my idea of, a penny for your thoughts every time, a penny for every second you have a thought, right? And what do you do with that, all that currency? How are you spending it? But it's also about, a kind of more subtle shift in perspective, maybe a different way of thinking. And, it's worth noting that this is a longer process here, and we're being invited to step into the flow and to let things unfold. So that is Sunday. When we move on to Monday, we have a couple aspects on Monday. Actually, there's three things happening on Monday, and there's a little bit of a tension on Monday, the 4th, between desire and expansion. And let me get to why I'm saying that. The first aspect takes place close to noon on Monday, and it's Venus, excuse me, is semi-square to Chiron. So as with all things Chiron, sensitivity, emotional sensitivity, but especially with Venus. Venus is a sign about love, a sign about feelings, a sign about relationship. It's also a sign about balance and justice and karma. So whether it's distinctly interpersonal or it's collective, there might be a sense of feeling tender, feeling vulnerable, feeling uncertain. And the key here is that we're in the middle. So it's okay if we're in the middle of something unfolding, and we get to that's it's a good time for us to remember that we can notice what's happening and notice and honor what we're experiencing without reacting. Because one of the ways, if we're spending the tokens of our consciousness this week and understanding that that's what the case is, then sometimes we might not feel like we're super duper in control all the time. So what do we do? That's when I was saying kind of maybe pump the brakes. Don't react. Take a deep breath. Take a bath. Take a walk. Pet your cat. Pet your dog. Do something off topic that might help soothe the nervous system and soothe the energetic body. I'll get to a meditation. I'll post another post this Sunday, as I always do with the meditation for this week. But that's around noon, and then around 4:30 in the afternoon we have Mercury semi-sextile to Neptune. And here, our perception might soften. Our communication might soften, and that's a good thing because, having our communication informed by our intuition is um is a good thing, and having more creative ideals and ideas about what we're communicating. So there might be this kind of subtle awareness around communication and perception because Neptune is the planet of illusion and delusion, right? So there might be a little bit of a lack of clarity, but it's important again for us to take care and to stay grounded. The day closes at 10:08 p.m. with Mars squaring Jupiter. So this is a really strong activating aspect. Mars is in Aries, making it very comfortable, very active. And Jupiter is in Cancer and making the expansion feel very emotionally centered. So this can create enthusiasm, it can create drive, it can create a desire to act. Caveat with Jupiter and Cancer, also it can create overextension and impatience or pushing for something. So it's important for us to stay connected to how we're using our energy. And I'm going to, kind of use this slowing down and staying present metaphor for this week. So not every impulse that comes through needs to be acted upon or followed. This is a good week to pause and take a breath and maybe revisit something in an hour or a day and make sure it still resonates as much as with as much fervency as it first did, or with as much accuracy and clarity. Let's move on to the May 5th, Tuesday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Uh, this is a day of truth surfacing. This is a day that the major aspect, the only aspect, involves Pluto, and Mercury and Pluto are squaring each other. And that happens around 6 in the evening. This is a powerful mental aspect if what we're speaking of, with the main theme being Uranus's transition into Gemini and having that be very much about our mental field and our communications being upgraded. Mercury is in Taurus right now, Pluto's in Aquarius. That squaring action has the potential to bring deep insight. It has the potential to really help us see the truth beneath the surface, as it is Pluto's want, right? It also might make conversations very poignant. I would use the word intense, but that carries a little bit of a heavy energy. Poignant to me just means that, an intense conversation can be a very exciting conversation at the same time, right? So, um, it's a really nice day to, help invite realizations. If we might feel very mentally focused, really get a sense of clarity, really understand what is and what is not important to us. So Pluto isn't light energy, let's remember. Um, Pluto is subtle energy, it's powerful energy, and squaring Mercury, it is clarifying energy. Let's move on to Wednesday, May 6th. So this is a day of realignment and creative insight. And this is another layered day with multiple influences coming through. Let's start at the top at 12:30 in the morning on May 6th. We have Mercury sextiling the North Node. So this is a really great moment of alignment. A sextile is a flow of energy, and it's alignment of our thoughts, our mental space, our mental body, and our direction. North Node is where we're headed, why our soul chose to incarnate at this moment in this body in this lifetime. So, it's an alignment between our thoughts and our direction. It's about something, maybe something we think or say or even realize might just have an extra layer of that depth and that breadth of meaning. If we're talking about North Node is about soul contracts and bigger picture vision. So the rest of the aspects take place, and there are three. They take place in the evening on Wednesday. And the first one is at 6 p.m., and that's Venus is quintiling Neptune. And this is a really soft but sort of creative influence. Venus brings beauty, Venus brings harmony and balance. And, Neptune is adding this sense of imagination and maybe even emotional openness because Neptune dissolves boundaries. Neptune dissolves. And we also have 2 hours later at 8 p.m., Mars is semi-square to the North Node. So this is going to introduce a little bit of tension, a little bit of friction, but let's remember friction isn't necessarily bad. It's often to awaken us, to show us something that we may have overlooked if we wouldn't have gotten a little slightly uncomfortable. So really the evening might have an adjustment point. And then at 9 p.m., an hour later, we have Mercury quintiling Jupiter. And this is another creative and expansive energy. So this is about creative and expansive thinking and creative and expansive communication. It's a really beautiful evening in general for writing and ideas and communicating and really just being able to, even in our mind's eye, intuit and see new possibilities. So really nice day on Wednesday. On Thursday, we is a day, May 7th. That's a day of grounded thinking. We have just one aspect, and that is Mercury semi-sextile to Saturn. That happens at 10 p.m. With Mercury semi-sextile to Saturn, Saturn's going to always want to ground stuff down, right? And so this is going to help our mental body and our mind become more structured and more disciplined. So practical thinking, focus, discipline are kind of the themes that might uh, be woven through Thursday. And that's kind of perfect because after the several days before that, there might have been more intense or poignant, as I said, days. This is really going to help to stabilize our mental field, our energetic body. We have our physical body, and we also, in energy healing, you have your emotional body and your mental body and your spiritual body. If that doesn't float your boat, you can also just think about your brain and your mind and the power of your thoughts and the power for me, as I like to get a little soapboxy about the power of our consciousness every moment. What are we doing? How are we spending our little consciousness tokens, right? So it's a really nice day on Thursday to just kind of take a deep breath and realize we're truly living in transformational times, and it's unprecedented on so many levels. And on Friday, May 8th, we have is a day of subtle alignment and sensitivity. There are just two aspects, but the first happens around 7 a.m., and that is the sun is going to quintile the North Node. And when the sun is quintiling the North Node, that's going to bring a really gentle sense of alignment. The words peace and grace come to mind. That's kind of a sense of direction, a quiet knowing, or just this sense that I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what is true. I know what, and really also, if we're thinking about our consciousness creating our reality and how we're spending our consciousness tokens, the North Node quintiling the Sun quintiling the North Node is really going to help us bring some integrity to that and understand how important we are. So maybe part of that quiet knowing is just really realizing that what I what I spend my time doing does matter. And then we also have the sun semi-square to Neptune. And in the first sun quintile north node happened at 7 a.m. The sun's going to be active again around 11 p.m. with the semi-square to Neptune. This might soften our sense of clarity a little bit. We might feel a little bit more sensitive or less certain, but it's important to know that this is not confusion. Because if we feel unclear about something, I think a lot of the times lack of clarity can mean confusion to us, right? But maybe lack of clarity is permeability. That's what Neptune's about. Permeability. If Neptune is dissolving boundaries and Neptune is semi-squaring to our sun, it's just a really nice time to let things remain open. And then we'll close with Saturday, May 9th. There's not a whole lot going on Saturday, May 9th. I often think of those days where there aren't any exact aspects as just days of integration, a quieter, energetic day, a moment to kind of integrate the week. And really, it's a moment to just let the body catch up with the mind. And if I could just sum up a couple of questions or themes, and I'll get to this more in depth in the meditation next, but, can we slow down enough to hear what is true? Can we ground our thoughts before acting on them? And can we allow clarity to emerge without forcing it? All of those themes link directly to how I started this week, which is it's a good week to kind of put it into neutral, or if we've been speeding down the highway or we can feel things picking up. It's not to say to resist it by pumping the brakes, but to understand that there's a flow and an ebb, as if we're not on a highway, we're in a river or a stream. And if we get caught up in a little bit of an eddy, we can trust that maybe there's a really good reason for that. And so, not everything needs to be decided and created immediately. And, the sense this week is let what is real become steady. So I hope that you have a blessed week. Thank you for joining me as always, and I'll send a log on meditation next. Take care, guys.